It was just past midnight when the doorbell camera notification buzzed on my phone, a sound so sharp it felt like it cut through the silence of the house. I almost ignored it at that hour. Nothing good ever arrives unannounced, but something in my chest tightened. A quiet warning that refused to let me rest. When I opened the front door, the porch light revealed a sight I will never forget as long as I live. My daughter stood there barefoot, her clothes torn, blood smeared across her sleeve and dripping slowly onto the cold tiles. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely stand. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The world felt frozen, like time itself had stopped to watch what would happen next. Then she looked up at me, eyes hollow, voice barely a whisper, and said the words that shattered everything I thought I knew about her marriage. As I pulled her inside and wrapped her in my arms, 1,000 questions raced through my mind, but none of them mattered as much as one terrifying truth. The man she loved, trusted, and built her life around had destroyed her from the inside out. The blood on her clothes was not just from a wound on her body, it was the visible proof of a betrayal that had been bleeding her heart for months. She kept apologizing, saying she didn't mean to come so late, that she didn't know where else to go. That's when I realized how alone she must have felt, trapped in a marriage that looked perfect from the outside while quietly rotting within. As she sat on the edge of the couch, flinching at every sound, the pieces of the story began to surface. Missed calls, late night sudden changes, lies stacked on top of lies. Until the truth could no longer stay hidden, what started as suspicion had turned into certainty. And certainty had turned into confrontation. And that confrontation ended with her standing on my doorstep, bleeding and broken, her entire world in ruins. The affair was no longer a rumor, no longer a fear whispered in the dark. It was real, and it had cost her more than anyone could imagine. Tonight's story is not just about betrayal. It's about the moment when love turns dangerous, when silence becomes survival, and when a daughter finally finds the strength to run toward safety, even if it means facing unimaginable pain. As you listen, ask yourself this: how well do we really know the lives of the people we love most? And how many signs do we miss until it's almost too late? Stay with me, because what happened after my daughter stepped through that door changed our family forever, and the truth behind her husband's affair was far darker than we ever expected. The doorbell rang again, sharp and desperate, cutting through the silence of the house when I opened the door wider. The porch light revealed what the darkness had been hiding. My daughter stood there barefoot, her clothes soaked in rain, blood smeared along her arm and staining the edge of her sleeve. Her face was pale, eyes hollow, like someone who had already screamed until there was nothing left inside. For a moment, my body refused to move. I couldn't understand how the child I once carried on my shoulders was now standing broken in front of me. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked, and instead she collapsed forward into my arms. The smell of rain, blood, and fear clung to her as I pulled her inside, locking the door behind us as if that could somehow lock out everything that had followed her. Here, her hands trembled violently. When I asked who did this, she didn't answer. She just shook her head and whispered one word again and again: please. I wrapped a towel around her arm, pressing gently to stop the bleeding, and that's when I noticed bruises forming along her wrist. Fingerprints darkening beneath the skin. My heart sank. These weren't from a fall, these were from someone who had held on too tight. I wanted to grab my phone and call the police immediately, but she grabbed my hand with sudden strength, begging me not to. Her eyes filled with tears as she finally looked at me and said she had nowhere else to go. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just a bad night. This was the end of something she had been quietly surviving for far too long. As she sat on the couch, wrapped in blankets, the story began to spill out in broken pieces. She told me how the marriage had changed months ago, slowly at first, in ways she tried to explain away. Late nights, locked phone screens, sudden anger over small things. Then came the whispers, neighbors' looks, messages from unknown numbers, laughter she overheard on calls that ended the moment she entered the room. She said she confronted him once, calmly, hoping for honesty. Instead, he laughed, told her she was imagining things, called her jealous, dramatic, unstable, over time. His words chipped away at her confidence until she began to doubt her own instincts. The affair wasn't a rumor, it was real, but he made her feel crazy for seeing it. When she finally found proof, messages that left no room for denial, his face changed. The man she married disappeared, replaced by someone cold and dangerous. He didn't apologize. He blamed her, said if she had been enough, he wouldn't have looked elsewhere that night. The argument escalated. She said he grabbed her arm when she tried to leave the room. She screamed, and that only made him angrier. He shoved her against the wall, shouting that she was ruining his life. The bleeding started when she fell against a broken edge of furniture. He didn't help her. He didn't ask if she was okay. He just stood there, silent, watching her cry like she was an inconvenience. That was when she ran. No shoes, no phone charger, just fear pushing her forward through the rain until she reached the only place she knew she'd be safe. Listening to her felt like drowning slowly. Every word tightened something in my chest. I kept thinking about the wedding day, the promises, the way he had looked so respectful standing beside her. I remembered defending him when friends raised concerns. Telling myself love required patience. Now, all I could see was how blind we had been. My daughter kept apologizing as she spoke, as if this pain was somehow her fault. I told her to stop, but she couldn't. She said she stayed because she believed he would change. Because she didn't want to disappoint anyone. Because leaving felt like admitting failure. She said the affair hurt. But the violence that broke something deeper. It taught her that love shouldn't feel like fear, and marriage shouldn't require silence to survive. As she spoke, the rain outside slowed, but inside our home, a storm had just begun. I realized this wasn't a story about betrayal alone. It was about control, gaslighting, and the slow erosion of someone's sense of self. I promised her she wouldn't go back. Not tonight. Not ever. For the first time since she arrived, she cried openly, the kind of sobs that come after holding everything in for too long. By morning, the house felt different, heavier but clearer. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, illuminating the bruises that looked even darker in daylight. I made her tea while she slept on the couch, exhaustion finally pulling her into rest. I spent that time making decisions I never thought I'd have to make. Calls were placed, family was informed, support systems were activated. When she woke up, I told her we would handle this together, step by step. She was afraid of judgment, of retaliation, of the future, but she wasn't alone anymore. She agreed to document her injuries. She agreed to talk to someone. It wasn't strength that pushed her forward, it was survival. And sometimes that's enough. As she leaned her head on my shoulder, I knew our lives had changed permanently. The marriage she entered with hope had ended in violence, but her story didn't end there. It continued here, in safety, in truth, and in the courage it takes to walk away from someone who was never worthy of her love. As the story comes to a close, I want you to take a moment to breathe and think about everything you've just heard: the pain, the betrayal, the silence, and the courage it takes to finally speak up. Stories like this aren't just about shock or drama, they're about real emotions, real families, and the hidden battles people fight behind closed doors. If this story moved you, taught you something, or made you feel less alone, then it has done its job. If you believe more people need to hear stories like this, stories that expose the truth, give a voice to the unheard, and remind us that no one deserves to suffer in silence, please support this channel. Subscribe for more powerful, emotional, and true-to-life stories. Like this video if it touched your heart, and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. And don't forget to leave a comment below your thoughts, your feelings, or even your own story, because sometimes speaking out is the first step toward healing. Thank you for listening, thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next story.